Hello, everybody. It's Tony Walla, making one of screaming Walla up in here one more time, doing real talk at the Barbershop, the virtual edition. And I'm so excited because, as you all know, over the last few weeks, we've been having conversations focused on issues that are impacting racial inequity in this country. We've talked about financially and economic empowerment issues. We've talked about criminal justice. We have talked about education. Well, today we get to talk about health care, health issues. I am so excited about this. It is something that I most definitely have a passion for. And I'm really excited for the fact that we get an opportunity to talk to a very dear friend, the wonderful, fabulous, dressed in red, yes, indeedy, Miss Shavon Arline-Bradley. And the crowd goes crazy.
Tony Waller, how are you? Good to see you in the barbershop.
Thank you. And I'm so glad that you're here in the barbershop where we can really, let me tell you something, it's tight, girl. It looks good. It looks good.
Got a line in for this. I got a line in for this one.
I love it. Shavon, it is so good seeing you. And before we got started with the recording, I was just saying how it's been a long time.
Almost a year and a half.
Almost Crazy. A year and a half. Can you believe it?
Crazy.
Who would have ever thought that this would be what things would look like today? Yeah. I could have never imagined this.
No. No one could have imagined it.
Right. And it's interesting, Shavon, because in so many ways, right, it's just disheartening to see all that is going on. But if I could be, we're in the barbershop, so I can be honest with you, there's part of me that smiles a little bit. And I'll tell you why. Because it has caused the world, it has caused us here to see the reality and not be able to excuse it, not be able to dismiss it, not be able to ignore it. Yeah. It is here. And if you can say to me that we don't have a problem, then man, I don't know. I don't quite know what's going inside, because I'm telling you, it is clear that we are in very interesting times. When you see what is happening in the world, and I'm sure that you have just seen all kinds of things. And ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you about Shavon. Shavon is probably, not only is she one of the most passionate people I know when it comes to health and healthcare, but she has done so much in this space. And so I'm just excited to just have this conversation and get her perspective of somebody who's on the ground every day seeing what's happening in this, in particular when it comes to how it's impacting disproportionately communities of color.
Absolutely.
It's a conversation.
Yeah. So I'm in the right shop. I'm in the right shop.
Hey, come on now. So Shavon, let me start with this.
Yeah.
Because you're out here, you seeing this. Talk to me about, describe your picture for me. Give me a picture of what healthcare looks like today from your vantage point. And then talk to me about that same vantage point when speaking about Black people and people of color.
First of all, thank you for the invitation. Virtual hugs to you and your listeners. Let's just start to talk about healthcare. I am a public health practitioner. So let me just give context what that means. We are the people that surveillance disease and plan population health so that the country stays alive. Some of us are clinicians, some of us are nurses, some of us are researchers, some of us are what we call epidemiologists, where they study disease. And so in the public health and healthcare standpoint, we were already seeing disparities. So that's a word you are going to keep hearing all the time. For those of us that have done work forever, that's an old word. We've known about disparities for years. The easy word for disparities are the differences between communities. What are the gaps? What makes it a difference between one community and another? So healthcare had already been stretched. Our GDP, we spend a very large amount of funds of our gross product, right, on healthcare and healthcare costs, on these preventable diseases, these diseases that people are suffering from chronically. Diabetes, right, heart disease, challenges with chronic asthma. Now, the landscape of that as it relates to people of color, for communities of color, for those that come from communities that have struggled in these areas, the struggle is not only connected to their personal behaviors. And that's what population health has really been trying to get people to understand. We've got to stop focusing on just treating sickness and dealing with the systems and infrastructures that then contribute to behaviors that may or may not be considered healthy. And that's really the vantage point that I bring to the table. And as I said, I'm a Black woman who's a wife and a mother and a minister, right? So this context for faith and health and family dynamics has been exacerbated. But I want your listeners to understand this is not new. This is not something that we just bumped up on. This is not some newfound research that's just been released. If you are a person of color in this country, well, I have 3 degrees, well educated, but my lifespan in comparison to others is actually shorter because of my race in this country. Is that just about my choice? No, it's about choices and systems. And that's a place where I think your listeners may come up into some new information that will help them understand, wow, this is not just my fault. This is not just someone's fault. This is about the way that our infrastructure has been set.
Yes, and it's interesting how this has become an even more complex issue given the fact that we now are dealing with COVID-19.
Absolutely.
So you put that on top of everything, that creates an interesting kind of situation for all of us. And and what I find really what I even find even more interesting, Shavon, is how now we really are talking a lot more about the systems, right?
Yeah.
Because for so long, it always has been about people's behaviors or what they did or did not do, and how we can control. And yes, we all have an individual role to play, right? But it's not all about just those individual roles, right? It's the fact that we also have other issues and systems in place that make it a little more challenging to come under control. And so,
yeah, this is why we got to come to the shop and talk, because the challenges that we have, and I'm talking about in our country right now, what healthcare has done is open the door to like Pandora's box, to the polarizing expressions of people's internal feelings about other people. I was working at the NAACP for about 7 years, and one of the first days on the job was when we were passing the Affordable Care Act. And I remember getting my first death threat at the office, specifically about creating opportunities for healthcare access for all people. And when I read that letter, and I still remember it to this day, I realized the sickness that prevails in our country's system, our country's psyche, our country's soul, is that it can connect racial responses and racial slurs to creating opportunities for a right that every person in this country should have. And so that is why I have to have faith first, right? To know that, you know what? And I'm okay with myself to say this: God has a plan for all of us. However you believe or decide is fine. But I also believe there's something greater than us. And we all have responsibility to keep this greatness going through all of our work. And that's why healthcare is so important to me. You can't serve sick. You can't serve when your body and your mind and your heart and your soul is not well. And I implore your listeners to reconfigure your mindsets to say, wow, what access do I have that others don't? Look at your grocery stores. Look at the access to the doctors that you have, and the medical, we call it medical homes. Your medical home, right? Is your hospital still intact? Has it been sold? Do I have a place to go gain my fresh fruits and vegetables? I mean, the things we take for granted, transportation. Do you have a car? Do you have public transportation accessible to you? Are your schools walkable? Right? And these are things that some people don't even think about. But when you don't have, I'm telling you, it makes you just kind of configure your intentions. That, my God, I'm so blessed because there's a family out there that may look like you or me, or may look like someone that you don't know, that is struggling just to stay alive. Where's your heart?
Yeah.
And that's what healthcare calls on us, our hearts.
Yes, and I tell you, it's interesting that you say this. I was having a conversation. I have a group of old college classmates, and we meet on Zoom every other week. And we were on our call this past Friday, and one of our classmates is an emergency room physician at Howard. And he said to me, well, I can only be on the call for a minute because I have a 6 a.m. call time, the next morning. So he was on for just a little bit. But we kind of got a little bit of his perspective of what was going on, in particular, now that COVID has done what it has done to our community. And he said, one of the things that he mentioned was the fact that how prior to COVID, what an impact the Affordable Care Act had that he had seen personally. He said, I actually saw less cases of diabetes coming through, less heart attacks and strokes, because now people were actually finding ways of taking care of themselves and feeling okay to take preventative measures that before they didn't feel like they could do. And so, and so it's interesting what you just said right here about the fact that, that having that access and the psyche of understanding that you have access where before you did not feel you did, how that can actually make a difference.
And people have historically felt they were destined to disease. My mama has it. This is in my family. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be sick. And I just push back on that. And this idea of knowing you have access is so created to kind of self-efficacy, right? Self-empowerment, understanding I am worth this. I am worth keeping myself alive. My life is worth this. And people really underestimate the role of having a medical home, and then in that medical home, gaining the kind of strategies from a medical provider, a nutritionist, a physical therapist, to really walk you through what kind of healthy living you can have. Now, COVID-19 has taken us to another level because your gyms were closed. You didn't have this, you just ate what you could. The shelves were empty, honey. I have loads of toilet tissue and canned corn, okay? Because I didn't know. Oh, okay, my mama trained me. Freeze it and keep it together. But think about that. Think about what it felt like to not have. And I will argue this to the end. For those 3 to 4 weeks, we didn't have the access we were used to. Welcome to the world of people of color that feel left out, that feel like nothing is available to them. That is an everyday experience for millions of Americans. And I believe that the divine creates time and space for us to be reflective. Not only be thankful for what you have, but take care of it, because you only get one body.
That's
you
right.
only get one family. You only get one time to do this.
Yes. I have a friend who says all the time, I have to take care of my Ferrari. He equates his body to a Ferrari, right? Like, I need to take really good care of it because it's the only Ferrari I'm gonna have.
So
and I find it so interesting that he does it that way. My hoopty, I gotta do something about my hoopty. Maybe one of these days I can get it to the right body shop. It'll turn it into a Ferrari.
I'm right behind you.
right?
We're gonna be
But
putting
right
in our
now,
BWs right behind,
but right now, this hoop they need a little work. Shavon,
Yes.
one of the things that that I have really been concerned about is the things that we can actually do to best take care of ourselves during this time.
Yeah.
And I really worry about it in particular for the folks who may not have access to information, who may not have access to the kinds of things that we assume people know how to do or know what to do, right?
Yeah.
Even things as basic as washing hands. We talk about washing our hands and washing our hands. I often wonder, is that message getting down to the right people who truly need this information? When you talk about things like social distancing, are we really helping people understand what that means? And in many cases, and you and I know this, Shavon, in many cases, they can't,
You
because
can't.
they're so densely populated in buildings and apartments, and the homes are so close together that sometimes you just can't do it. And so, what are we doing to offer alternatives to these individuals so that they know that they can empower themselves to do some things? They might not be able to do it all as prescribed by the powers that be, but here are the things that we can do. And I
Yeah.
really, really have some concern about how do we make sure that we're getting good information, alternative information where the prescribed methods just don't work, given the situation, the environment that they're in. And so I'd like to get your thoughts on that. And what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so I do a lot of work with folks in urban, suburban, and also rural areas. Don't forget the rural communities, particularly tribal leaders. And they cringe at a lot of the content that's being shared because one is not culturally sound, right? Social distancing from my grandmother is not okay, right? Especially if she lives with you, especially if you are the caretaker for your family, for generations of family. So let's just talk about the kind of cultural connection to particularly communities of color. We are a familial people. So our context is barbershop. Our context is to be around. Somebody dies, we come around. Somebody gets married, we come around. Somebody woke up, we coming around. Because that is how we have exchanged and really have built ourselves over generations. The hand washing has always been the biggest, I think, misconception, because I had a tribal leader tell me, Shavon, you make a gross assumption when the CDC and all of the other public health leaders come in and assume that we have hand sanitizer, soap, and hot water. And it blew my mind, because there are still usage of, well water and having to heat up water. I mean, you just don't think about these things. So liquid soap, no, bar soap, right? Whatever's available to people. So we have to be culturally sound. In general, I say two things. One, the hand washing is an important thing. We've got to figure out a way to ensure that people do know how to safely wash their hands with at least a minimum of 20 seconds of very good washing. Again, trying to keep your hands out of your eyes, nose, and mouth. So that I use that for my son. These are the no-touch areas for our hands. The other piece around physical distancing. Now let's change our language if we can, because social distancing has made this thing even harder. We should be physically distanced and socially connected. All right? Physically distant. I'm physically distant from you, Tony. But right now, we are socially connected. That is a part of building our health, because our emotions, our bodies are made up to have companionship, to have friendship. All the loners out there in the world, you need somebody to call once in a while, right? So we want to be physically distant, 6 feet minimum, better 6 to 10, right? Because when particles fly, we talk particles fly. That's just natural. That's going to happen. And so that's why, hello, the preacher's talking, church, places of faith, and we're some singing people, right? So the more we sing, the more we engage, the more particles fly, and the more virus can go with it, right? So This is nasty to think about, but that's what happens in church every Sunday. We've been singing spit for a long time. But the difference now is that we have a pandemic, we have a virus that it seems to be airborne, trying to confirm that more, but it seems to be. And so we've got to be very careful there. The last thing in terms of healthcare, though, I want to go back to some of grandmom's ways, because grandmom's ways were right. It's kind of cleaning of surfaces with, the appropriate chemicals, not to be ingested, but to be used on hard surfaces, high touch areas, those doorknobs, those faucets of the sink, okay, those handles on the cabinets, the refrigerator door, whatever we touch all the time, wipe it down. Grandma knew what she was doing when she tapped bleach into some of her water and did some of that cleaning. So those are some of the things that we want to take advantage of and make sure that people know those basics will save your life. And the last thing, please wear a mask. It is not political to wear a mask, my friends. I want to help people understand there's no partisanship in health and practical health tips. We know that a face covering, if you can't even afford a mask, a face covering can help with reducing the spread of particles that can cause transmission. So just wanted to highlight that.
That's awesome, Shavon. That really is. And I appreciate that. And I love this new terminology, and I'm gonna tweet it out, girl. I am tweeting it out. Physically distant, socially connected.
Come on, Tony Wallace.
I love that. I'm definitely gonna tweet that tonight, and I will give you full credit.
Shout it out, baby.
I will definitely do that. Shavon, let's switch gears for a minute.
Sure.
Because one of the things that I think that also is coming out that we are realizing is this need for mental health. The fact that that more and more, given the challenges that we are having to deal with, both from a health standpoint and as a result of all the unfortunate challenges that exist in our country today, whether we're talking employment or unemployment issues, whether we're talking criminal justice issues, police brutality, just the physical distancing. All these things are having a toll on people's mental health. And I'm really concerned in particular about kind of like the bookends. I mean, I think everybody's got issues, but I'm concerned about the bookends. Our more mature people, our seniors, and our children.
Yeah.
We all need help, and I'm an advocate for it. Being very transparent here, I am someone who has been in therapy for a very long time, and not because there was anything going on, but for me, it made sense. Now, I also have to give all credit to my parents, who were way ahead of their time, way ahead of their time. When it was a stigma, they didn't see it that way. And so we were brought up to believe and embrace it, right? And so my mama would say, baby, you go to the doctor twice a year for your physical, right? You go to dentist twice a year to get your teeth cleaned. You get your eyes checked every year.
Right, that's right.
Why wouldn't you check your head, which is the most important thing? And so doing that is just, going to therapy is just a head physical, if you want to look at it that way. And sometimes it'll mean the doctor said, I hear something, I see something, we might have to spend a little more time there. Or he or she may say, you're looking good, you're sounding good, I'll see you in 6 months or a year, or if you got something, give me a holler.
It's
right?
a tune-up. It's a
tune-up. I love it. So, give me your perspective on the healthcare challenges we have right now.
And let me break this down, because the preacher goes to therapy too. I want to help the people. Call the pastor, the imam, and the rabbi, and then when you hang up, call your therapist, right? See, this is what we've done. We've stigmatized this thing And in particular in communities of color, because there's such a stigma around, like, you are not standing in your faith, you are not operating. No, you're standing in ignorance if you do not go get yourself checked out. And the mental health right now is such an issue because of social isolation. When you're socially isolated, that is not normal. We are a being made and created to have connection, physical and emotional connection. And so if you don't get a hug for 6 months, and I'm not even, it doesn't have to be sexual. I'm talking about someone give me a hug. Let me know I'm embraced in a moment. So there's this massive need for people to at least feel connection. We've seen suicide increases. Hate to say this, we've seen domestic violence, massive increase there. And to me, that's connected to mental health, quite frankly. We've seen young people, you talked about it, the boomers and the babies. My boomers that are seniors, my mother could not see my son for 3 months. It drove her crazy. And we had to, she's like, I'm gonna get my test so I can just know I need to hug somebody. And her and my dad have been married for years, but being away from their friends and family was just difficult, and they're in their 70s. And I have the 6-year-old, I got the sandwich, I've got the 70s and 6. And he is, I can see as a young person, longing for connection. Now let's think about this, Tony. We have access to internet, broadband. So I can call the Jack and Jill moms. I can call them and say, put your baby on, let's have a play date. What about the moms that don't have the access? What about the children that didn't get on one classroom session between March and June because no one had the access? You brought them a Chromebook without the access to the internet to start the thing, right? No one was there because mom relies on school because mom or dad is working constantly to keep people eating. And so the amount of stress that builds up is so overwhelming. And my heart bleeds in that space because I'm stressed and I got access to resources. What about our families that don't? What about our families that have multiple children? No fault of those babies' own. They are hungry. And the kind of mental stress that puts on a parent that can't feed a vulnerable child or can't feed their ailing parent who has a chronic condition, who needs their medication. So you got to work to make sure both people have what they need. So it's just a massive amount of pressure. And this kind of increased rate of suicide, increased rate of mental breakdowns has been major. And we've got to take this mental health care very seriously and then work on changing this language, right? Healthcare needs to include mental health. Like, we got to stop it being compartmentalized as this other thing. Total healthcare, optimal health is your mind, your body, and your spirit. And so how that intertwines with all your emotional needs is really important.
So Shavon, where do we go from here?
Up. We go up from here. I started from the bottom, now I'm here. Yeah, we're gonna go up. What do I mean by up? I mean, honestly, listen, if our country takes this seriously, looks at this through a population health lens, if we do the work, United States of America, my countrymen, I love you all, but let's do the work together. We have seen diseases come through generations before. Imagine how it felt for folks that were dealing with polio, trying to find the vaccine, right? Imagine the folks during the Spanish flu time. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives. Sound familiar? And what did they do? They learned about the virus and made the necessary steps to keep people healthy. And I'm saying that we go from here. If we want to see these cases take a turn, we re-up on doing our parts at home: hygiene, face coverings, physical distancing, social connections on video when we can, even play dates with masks on and distances, right? Find those ways to do that outdoors if you can. But then we also think about our long-term plans. How do we invest in research to find vaccines? How do we create clinical trials that are equitable, that are thinking about every community and not just one community? And then where's your faith? Having faith and knowing that greater has to come. We have hit a very difficult time in our country. We've had social unrest and a healthcare pandemic clash. Leverage the time for your creativity and to do great things, because on the other side of this coronavirus experience, your best work is yet to come. Yeah. I'm a firm believer in that. So we go up.
Shavon, let's talk about us as individuals and the roles that we can play in reaching solutions to the healthcare challenges that we have. What would be your advice to the roles that all of us can play? Meaning, whether I have access or not. So if I don't have access, if I don't have understanding, what can I do? Yeah. If I am just an individual in a day-to-day, you know, I'm just a regular Joe day-to-day, what can I do? If I'm a person that has a little bit of access, a little bit of access, whether it's information or people or resources, what can I do? As collective communities, what can we do? What can local governments do? What are some of the things I would love to kind of, because I believe that all of us can play a role. Yeah. You know, all of us can do something. And whatever we do is going to be good. It's better than doing absolutely nothing. Yeah. And so would like to give your thoughts as somebody who's in the field all the time, as a public health professional. Yeah. What would you tell us?
Let's start with the individual, with your individual body and how you play into the larger population health experience. And so one is listen to your body. Access or not, there are things that you know that are right and things that you know that are wrong. If something feels different, if you're aching, if you're sensing some temperature changes, you know, and I tell people all the time, your body is smarter than you. It creates sensors of pain and aches and prodding and pulling and tugging and saying, white flag, do something about it. So coronavirus or not, listen to your body. Practical example, I know that my tension headaches are my sign. Here and here. They're in certain zones. And when I'm feeling that thing, I shut down. 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 8 o'clock at night, doesn't matter what time it is, I go lay down. Because I know that my body is saying, need a reset. And if I feel something, I make the phone call. I call my doctor, I engage. As it relates to larger community work, right? It's connected to how we're doing our own personal behaviors. Trying to find the best way to eat at this time, trying to find ways to improve your physical activity in your home. And yes, you can go outside if it's safe and appropriate to gain some movement in your body. We have to think about our government's engagement here, right? Calling on governments to have safe plans for people to have walking trails, adding more lights at night for people to be able to walk and engage that way, having clear social distance, physical distance regulations so that people can be safe in parks if they have access to parks. And you think about places like basketball courts, things like that. Listen, sometimes that's the only thing a child may have. So making sure that those places are clean, that there are some regulations on how people utilize them, clear signage to remind people, don't forget your face mask, right? Don't forget your covering. You know, this is what the local governments can do. And listen, over-communicate local governments. Press conferences, radio spots, text messages to your community members, emails from school. I mean, we've got to over-communicate so people can see those warnings. Mobile places, mobile communication is very huge at this time. Because see, we're not riding the cars like we were before. So we need people to start, you know, texting, sending text alerts. Telehealth is a good place right now. Got to start using our phones and our mobile devices to be able to engage. I think the last thing, honestly, in terms of like community-wide health is show the progress. Like if we would show the progress more, like people right now are seeing the spikes constantly, but like the states where it's working or things that have worked, we've got to highlight those stories too. and then tell human stories. That 9-year-old girl in Florida, my heart is aching for that mother because I know she's no longer with us. But I know her life is probably going to make a huge difference in school systems across the country. So tell these human stories. Tell the stories about how people were able to survive and what they did to stay well to prevent the pass of this virus.
Well, Shavon, you a bad sister. You know that?
I love
You
you.
are a bad sister. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate having this conversation with you. You've left some amazing nuggets for all of the listeners and the viewers of Real Talk at the Barbershop, and I really appreciate it. You know that I'm a huge fan of yours, and will always be. And I admire so much the passion that you have for this work, because for you, this is not just a job. It is not just something to do to keep you busy. It is truly, you have taken this on as your assignment in this world, and it shows. And know that you are making a difference and doing some really great work. And just like you said, you know, we ain't seen nothing yet from you. We have not seen nothing. The best is yet to come for you. And so you I encourage you to continue doing what you're doing, and you go forth and do what you got to do. But before I let you go,
yes,
is there a word you want to leave to? Is there a word that you want to leave in the barbershop?
There's a word: all things work together for the good for those that love God and are called according to His purpose. I promise you. If you are committed to that word, like all things work out for good. So even the bad stuff is going to work out for your good. I have to preach on Sunday, so that's a good question to ask me, Tony Waller, as I'm trying to figure out what the Lord is going to make me say. But I'm telling you, in the end, you're going to win. If you have faith, if you know that you have been put on this earth for a purpose, don't let this pandemic stop your purpose. Don't let this place hold you down and suppress that which is inside of you that wants to come out. So if you're supposed to start a business, start it. If you're supposed to go back to school, go. If you got laid off, use that time to re-up on the next plan. I promise you, you not only are loved, but you are called according to purpose. So the word of the day is, it's going to be good, whatever it is.
Indeed, I love it. As my mama would say, baby, the plan for you is good and the plan for you is perfect.
Yeah.
You just gotta trust that plan. She said, now, understanding the plan was not part of the deal.
It ain't the deal. That's not in the deal.
Loving the plan all the time was never part of the deal. But if you trust the plan, it will show itself to be perfect and good. So I love it.
Love you, Tony Waller.
I love you, Shavon. Thank you so much. I enjoyed this conversation so much. And I wish you all the best, and know that we are behind you every step of the way. Keep on doing what you're doing to help people live better. Absolutely. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you got as much out of this as I did, because I know it was awesome for me. And I can't wait to go back and hear all this, because there was so much tweetable stuff up in this that I got to grab onto it. Yes, indeed. But Shavon, you go out here, do what you got to do. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today. And I'll see you next time at the barbershop for some real conversation, the virtual edition.